Israel has agreed to a new U.S.-backed ceasefire proposal. U.S. President Donald Trump posted to social media late Monday saying it would be a 60-day deal, quote, during which time we will work with all parties to end the war. The Qataris and the Egyptians, who have worked very hard to help bring peace, will deliver this final proposal. I hope for the good of the Middle East that Hamas takes this deal, he wrote. In Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's first remarks since Trump's post, he vowed there will be no Hamas in a post-war Gaza.
לא יהיה חמאס, לא יהיה חמאסטן, לא חוזרים לזה, הדבר הזה נגמר. אנחנו נשחרר את כל חטופינו ואנחנו נכריע את החמאס, לא יהיה.
A Hamas spokesperson says they were ready and serious regarding reaching an agreement, saying any deal must bring an end to the war. A Hamas delegation met with Egyptian and Qatari mediators in Cairo today. For more analysis of the situation, I'm joined by Aaron David Miller, Senior Fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and a former negotiator and advisor with the U.S. State Department. Hello. I'd like to ask you first your sense of how much optimism you have about this ceasefire deal.
I mean, I think two things have changed. Number one, the Prime Minister of Israel has additional running room with respect to his coalition as a consequence of 12 days of extraordinary Israeli operational strikes against Iran's command and control nuclear sites engineers. That's number one, probably the most important. But then there's number two, which is Donald Trump's leverage over Mr. Netanyahu has appreciably grown as a consequence of his decision to go where no other Republican or Democratic president has gone and authorize strikes with B-2 Spirit bombers against three key Iranian nuclear facilities. I think the combination of both of those things probably brings us closer to another interim trade, 10 alive hostages and 10 ones who are not alive, in exchange for a 2-month ceasefire and some redeployment of Israeli forces within Gaza, but no end to the war. And I think we need to be very sober and clear-eyed about this. Hamas would then find a way to control 10 living hostages and 10 who are not alive. So we still have a ways to go. Okay. And even if the hostage problem was resolved, the three key questions about Gaza remain unanswered. Who or what is going to govern Gaza? How will Israeli security requirements be attended to? And what about the galactic task, the billions of dollars that has been required, not just to surge humanitarian assistance to a desperate population, but the task of reconstruction?
Okay, you have covered an incredible amount of ground there, Aaron David Miller. So let's sort of digest this piece by piece. I hear your sense that a deal a shorter-term deal is more likely. As we watch this process play out, what do you see as the biggest possible stumbling blocks?
I mean, I think right now it's an ironclad commitment on the part of the government of Israel that even if there are hostages released, the sine qua non for Israel to even contemplate a formal declaration of the end of the war and to make good on it with respect to the practical deployment of their forces in Gaza, it's already been laid out, which is Hamas, the senior leadership of Hamas, is expelled from the Gaza Strip, roughly, twice the size of the District of Columbia. All of its residual military, its short-range rockets, its IEDs, and its weapons, and the factories that are making them, and the supply chains that are providing them through Sinai, all of this is going to have to be shut down. And I think there's absolutely no flexibility on the part of the Israeli government to call an end to the war before Mr. Netanyahu gets his total victory, because he's presiding over a coalition which I think will leave at least the two key extremist elements, Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, will leave the coalition without that sort of a total victory. And I think that's going to remain very elusive.
So if you were a negotiator involved in this process, then, as you say, this is elusive. It is a circle that is difficult to square. What path would you pursue to try to address this seemingly unsolvable situation?
I mean, what you need is someone to own this. And I would argue the only country capable of putting its arms around this problem and working with key Arab states to marshal an Arab force which would supplement a well-trained Palestinian police force and the return of some Palestinian Authority presence in Gaza, even if it's a transitional governance situation where you have technocrats and individuals not associated with the PA. Somebody has to put a strategy on the table and mobilize key Arab states, pressing the Israelis to understand that the war clearly right now is a political war. The Israelis have accomplished most everything they set out to do, mobilizing the international community to supplement the assistance that's going to be required, and tapping the Gulf most likely for the billions of dollars that are going to be required to even imagine a better future for a long-suffering Palestinian population. If nobody owns it, and if you don't have a rational strategy, because politics gets in the way, or in the case of, I'm talking to you from Washington, D.C., in the event the president of the United States loses focus and basically turns his attention to somewhere else, this problem is going to drift. And Gaza is going to continue to deteriorate. Criminal gangs, Hamas will make a resurgence. It's going to be as awful a situation as we've experienced yet. So that's what's required. And there's no magic fairy dust that can be sprinkled on the situation. It takes patience, resolve, will, and skill. And right now, I haven't seen it.
I'd like to hear you reflect on Donald Trump's role in all of this. You nodded earlier to the significance of the U.S. intervention in Iran in sort of changing the geopolitical calculation here, if I can put it that way. You see some of the media that is quite friendly to Trump, asking him when he's going to win his Nobel Peace Prize and whatnot. And yet you acknowledge that the steps here have changed the dynamic. So how are you thinking about Donald Trump in this moment and his contribution?
I mean, that's a complicated question because his foreign policy is accompanied by an extraordinary effort at aggrandizement of presidential power. The real challenge, frankly, is not abroad for Americans. It's back here at home. We're seeing whole institutions, Voice of America, the U.S. Institute of Peace, USAID, completely hollowed out. People are losing their jobs, selfless public servants. Look, you've got a president who is, frankly, does not have, in my judgment, a coherent concept of what constitutes the national interest. Most everything he does is subordinated to his financial interests, his politics, his whims, his fancies, his prejudices. And I think he asserts himself in situations and at moments, but doesn't have the sort of focus and patience. He wants to end the war in Ukraine, for example. Excuse me. He wants to end the fighting in Ukraine, but not the war. He wants to get the hostages out of Gaza, but he's unwilling to embrace and own a much more complicated process of what comes after that. And I would bet that had the Israelis not struck June 12th, 13th for 12 days, Donald Trump would have continued to negotiate with the Iranians to negotiate some sort of transactional deal that would have parked the Iranian nuclear issue, stabilized it for the remainder of his term. So I don't look to Washington for what I would call strategic leadership. It's transactional, it's situational, and very often the patience factor becomes very, very important. The region's sense of time is, I've measured my life for almost 30 years in 48-year increments. Middle Eastern leaders think in much more in generational terms. And you have a president who isn't patient and for whom a week or 10 days is considered a long period of time to focus. So I don't have high expectations. It would be terrific if, in fact, you'd see that sort of strategic thinking and focus and will and skill, because that's what it takes to do deals in this part of the world.
Okay.
And I'm not sure the president is equipped.
Okay, we are grateful for your insights today. Thank you very much, former U.S. negotiator Aaron David Miller.
Thanks for having me.